Hey, Sens fans, welcome to another edition of the Senstennial Podcast, your favorite show, I'm sure. And today, on this week's episode, we are going to talk about Ottawa's goaltending. We're obviously going to focus on Ullmark, who was recently named the NHL's third star of the week. Then we're going to look at Anton Forsberg and the injury he sustained in warmups not too long ago. And then we're going to pivot and look at something else. We'll get there when we get there. But first, let's kick things off right. Let's talk about the positives. And for once, we have positives in December for the Ottawa Senators. This is like breaking news for our podcast. You know, we've been around since 2020, and this is the first time that we can really say that the Sens are doing well this late into the season, which is almost sad to say, but that's where we're at. So I'll kick things over to Matt first to get us started. And what can you say about the Sens, into December on a winning streak right now, and Linus Ullmark's great performances as of late?
It's been pretty cool because the last time we had podcasted together, we were all pretty negative about the Ottawa Senators, and rightfully so. They were bad. But now the Ottawa Senators are good, and we are good too. Um, yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool to the first time in our podcast history that this is the latest the Ottawa Senators are in a playoff spot. And obviously, it's December and it's a far way, and it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And we just have to keep hoping that the Sens keep playing well. But as I wrote with Bennett in one of our articles, the change of season starts from the crease, and that's Linus Ullmark, and that's exactly what he's done. In the last 5 games, he's posted a 966 save percentage. He has a 0.99 goals against and an 8.48 goals saved above expected. And he's 5-0, which is absolutely insane. And then he made that ridiculous save on Carlson after coming in to the game as the backup for Forsberg, right? But even before things were about to get started. And I think everybody wanted Ullmark to start that game, and it was almost as if the hockey gods forced it to happen. And Ullmark just what can't you say about the guy? He's humble, he's a good fella, and he stops the puck a lot. I think the shutout against the Hurricanes is probably the most impressive goaltending performance by a Senators goalie in some time. Not because it's the amount of saves he had or what have you, but it was against the Hurricanes, and I feel like the Sens haven't beaten the Hurricanes in what seems like decades. And I'm sure we beat them randomly last season or something like that. I don't even know.
And do you know
But
what another crazy stat is? That is the first time the Sens have shut out the Carolina Hurricanes in 51 of their previous 51 matchups. First time that they've gotten a shutout. And it
that
was
almost
like
does
I
sound like
think
decades.
yeah, I think their last shutout against them was like 2007 or something. So it has been a long time
hmm
coming.
I seem to
Holy.
recall hearing on the radio that Ray Emery was in net for that game. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a long time.
It's just one of those things that we haven't had a competent goaltender in so long, since Craig Anderson, actually. And even when Anderson's game started to tail off, we still had the confidence in him, but we've never had confidence in any of the guys we've picked up because they didn't give us anything to be confident about. And we talked about that Ullmark game where he essentially cost them the game against Philadelphia, and he took that personally, and he turned it around and said, "I'm Linus Ullmark, and I'm a good goalie," and that was about it. He's great, and the Sens being where they are right now, um, this is probably the highest high we've had in a very long time. So I'm going to pass it over to Bennett because he is the king of highs.
Not so sure about that one. Yeah, the Sens are in a good spot right now. I believe since we last recorded, there's been 6 games. The Senators have won 5 of them. The one loss being the one against New York, where Forsberg was in net. So that's a really good record to have at this point in the season. The Sens have clawed their way back into playoff contention. Obviously, still a long way to go. We're only at the 30-game mark. But this does feel significant, and it does feel different, perhaps, to other seasons. We noted all along the first 10, 20, 30 games, the Senators were doing a good job of limiting shots against. We were consistently outshooting our opponents, even if we weren't generating a lot of high danger chances. So on paper, things seemed to be going relatively well, but our results were very patchy. And we hoped that the Senators would benefit from kind of like a statistical regression to the mean, which in this case would actually lead to an uptick in their winning percentage. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen that bear out. Now we haven't been facing a ton of very good opposition. Detroit are, struggling alongside us to regain respectability. Nashville are complete crap this year. The Islanders are really struggling. Anaheim, again, not a good team, riddled with injuries. Though beating Carolina, like you said, it is significant. Shutting them out felt like a bit of a statement win. And Pittsburgh, again, a team that's been very up and down in recent years. So we haven't been doing it against amazing opposition, but you can only beat the teams that are in front of you. And to win 5 of the last 6, again, feels significant for a team that has struggled at this point in previous seasons.
Yeah, definitely. And especially, touching on that Pittsburgh game, they had just lit up Montreal, a couple nights prior, 9-2. And then they came into Ottawa. And, that's a team that's probably coming in with a lot of confidence in the last game they played, trying to maybe start a bit of a run to get themselves in a playoff position. And Ullmark just completely shut the door. And you could see, and the Sens were on the second game of a back-to-back, and they were starting to fade as the third period came around. You could see that they were just really running on fumes. And Ullmark was just excellent. Matt, you already mentioned his one save with the paddle. He also made an excellent blocker save on Crosby in the third period. That was unreal. And he just looked really solid. And I was thinking it, I didn't say it because I didn't want to jinx it, but I guess it didn't matter. But like when the Sens were still up, like 1-0 or what have you, I was like, man, he looks unbeatable again tonight. Is this really gonna happen? And obviously it didn't, but he still had an excellent game. And in the last 7 games, being 6-0-1 and having a save percentage of .950 is ridiculous. And Bennett, you're right. Haven't played a ton of top tier competition. On the road trip they're going on, it's going to be a while, a long one, 9 games. But that'll be, I think, a true test. The Sens haven't been as bad on the road this season as they were last year. They were awful last year on the road. But this will be a big test for them. If they can come into the new year and come back home and be, have a winning record on the road and be still in like a playoff position, I think that'll be huge for not just, confidence, but also just momentum. I feel like once you start to get into the second half of the season, you're like, okay, like we could do this. Let's keep rolling with it. And I think, it might be time, depending on how this road trip goes. I think Staios will have to look at the roster and see how he can add to it rather than who he should ship off, as, some people might have been starting to think about in November when they were really struggling. So anyway, and one of those players who maybe you'll have to take a look at is the backup goalie, because we know Forsberg was injured. They've recalled Leevi Merilainen, who, Matt, I know you're a big Leevi guy.
And, big Leevi guy.
And that's something maybe the Sens look at. But in the meantime, let's talk about that maybe a little bit more. And Bennett, I'll kick it over to you. Forsberg has an injury. Prior to warmups, I believe they mentioned that he had an incident in like the workout room and just couldn't go. They get the e-bug run into the arena down the road. I know he's already done a couple bits on TSN 1200 and with Sens talk. So, he had quite the media whirlwind around him. And now Leevi Merilainen gets the backup role. And there are, I think at least one, potentially two back-to-backs on the road trip. So it'll be interesting to see what start they give him. But yeah, Bennett, maybe thoughts on the backup goaltending situation.
Yeah, it is interesting how quickly narratives change in hockey. It's true of all sports. Games happening every couple of nights. Just within the span of a few weeks, you can see large swings in sort of fan opinion. We've certainly seen that with Forsberg and Ullmark. At the start of the year when Ullmark looked shaky and was getting settling in, and Forsberg looked solid. People were saying that the team should be starting Forsberg, resting Ullmark, giving Forsberg the reps early on. And then, there's a point there where Forsberg had the edge in save percentage and in goals against and shutouts. And, people were really starting to question the acquisition of Ullmark. I think the three of us were all relatively clear that, Ullmark's here for the long term and that we've never acquired a goalie of this quality in recent years, and we trusted him to come good. And I think most Senators fans were of the same opinion. And now you've seen those opinions switch, right? Forsberg's had a few rough starts, including the games against New York, the Islanders last week. And Ullmark, as we said, NHL third star, 5 wins out of 5. He's climbed up to above 900 save percentage on the year, while Forsberg has climbed down from above 900 to 889. And I think we're probably going to only see that trend continue. Ullmark on the rise, or at least stabilizing to where we expect him to be. Forsberg probably stabilizing it a little bit below 900, which would sort of gel with where we would largely expect him to be. Now, that being said, it's not great, right? I mean, you need a backup goaltender to be able to put in and trust that you can win the easy points and give your starter a night off. That's how teams employ their backup goaltenders. You put them into favorable situations, hoping that you can, rest your top guys and let them earn you the points that you need to earn. And if you don't feel like you can do that, and you feel like you need to rely on your starting goaltender, not just against the good teams, but against the bottom feeders, then that's a problem, right? And I'm curious to see how Merilainen auditions. He's likely to get a game or two on this 9-game road trip. I think he's had a solid year in Belleville. He has, been, I think, quietly putting together a respectable minor league profile. And I think he's certainly earned an opportunity to showcase his skills at the NHL level. Matt Sogard is still injured, and I think has had a number of opportunities at the NHL level and hasn't been able to impress. Perhaps it's Merilainen's turn to have a crack at it and show what he can do. So yeah, I'll be curious to see how that plays out. I don't know if I'm at the point now where I think that we need to trade Forsberg. I mean, a couple of rough games aside, he's usually relatively reliable. Again, not setting the world on fire, but enough to, usually not lose you games. And I don't know when we have him under contract until, but
just this year.
I was gonna say, yeah, it probably ends this year. So I don't know if I would be looking to maybe trade him at the deadline. I don't know how much value he would have. Maybe a late round pick. Yeah. I don't know if you want to ride Merilainen in that situation for a few games here and there, but all in all, I think that goaltending has reached a point now where I think we would have expected it to be at the start of the year, where you have Ullmark starting the majority of games, playing well, Forsberg getting the occasional start, playing generally okay.
Yeah, and earlier when I said they have a back-to-back or two, no, they have 3 of them. So this is going to be quite the road trip. Now, I know they're already out in Seattle. Some of the players were at the Seahawks-Packers game on Sunday night. RIP Seahawks, it was a tough night for them. But they're playing the Kraken on Tuesday night. Their back-to-backs are playing Vancouver on the 21st, and then the next night they're playing the Oilers. So that'll be a tough one for them. The 28th and 29th, they play the Jets, and then the next night play the Wild, another really tough back-to-back. And then the last back-to-back they have is against Dallas and then St. Louis, who is really turning their season around now with Jim Montgomery behind the bench. So another tough back-to-back. So it's really going to be a bit of a gauntlet for the team. Like, I'd say the easiest team they face on that road trip is Detroit, and that's at the end of the road trip. So who knows how tired they'll be, and how the games before then will have gone. But I think this is a chance to really impress people and show that they either belong in the playoff standings or aren't quite at that level yet. And I think this road trip will really be a big determination for that. But yeah, Matt, I'll flip it over to you to get your thoughts maybe on goaltending situation when we're looking past Ullmark.
Yeah, I think when Forsberg didn't make the trip initially, that's pretty telling of an injury. So unfortunately for Forsberg, I can't imagine we'll be seeing him in the next couple of games. But I think it might be good for him to kind of rest and reset a little bit, especially when you're in a slump like you are. And listen, we released an article that was essentially suggesting like Forsberg isn't necessarily the problem, but he's not even close to the solution. And when you have 12 shots against and you've let in 3 goals, you're not holding up your end of the bargain. And so I think it's a great thing for Merilainen to get a shot, because you get to see what you have in the goalie of the future, or possibly one of the goalies of the future. And he's having a really good season in Belleville. And so just giving him a game, probably on one of the back-to-backs is ideal. But for me, I think it really comes down to Ullmark. If he wants games, you give him games. He's the guy. And I think there has to be a right mix of coaching decisions, but also letting your starting goalie make some of the calls as well. He hasn't started over 40 games in a season or something like that. This year he's going to. So obviously December and road tripping, that's when you want to have your goalie, your starting goalie, making as much amount of noise as possible. And getting wins is important down this stretch, because if the Sens want to continue playing the way they are, it's all reliant on Ullmark.
Yeah, and sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the nice thing about these back-to-backs is, after the first set of back-to-backs, there's 5 days off. And then after that set of back-to-backs, there's 3 days off. So hypothetically, if Ullmark really, let's say Merilainen gets one of the first back-to-back games and he doesn't look very good and the Sens aren't really sure, Ullmark will at least have a lot of resting time between the back-to-backs. So if they really want to run with him on back-to-backs, he will have some recovery time. Like you were just saying, Matt, like he doesn't have any season where he's played, like really been the true number one who's gotten the heavy workload. He has always really kind of thrived as a tandem goalie. So it'll be a big test for him. But yes, absolutely, the Sens will need him down the stretch, no question.
Yeah, and I think Merilainen, as I said, you get to see what you have in him, but also like having a goalie transition to being a backup goalie is way easier than a young goalie transitioning to being a starter. And not everybody's going to be Dustin Wolf. More often than not, they're going to end up like a Devin Levi. And that's not to say Devin Levi is going to be a bad goalie. I think he's probably one of the most technically gifted goalies I've seen. However, I think Merilainen technically is an excellent goalie. And if he gets to be a backup to a guy like Ullmark, who is also technically gifted, it provides like so much mentorship there. And the drastic difference in style between, let's say, Ullmark and Sogard is significant enough that I don't know if there would be as much there, because they aren't the same type of goalie. Whereas Merilainen, he's Finnish, and Finns are technically sound goaltenders. That's how they produce them. They want them by the book, and Swedes are very much the same. Philip Gustafsson, he's incredible with how boxy he is, and his movements are fluid, and he gets to the position he needs to be without being super flashy. And Ullmark's exactly the same. So if I was them, I would probably consider looking around the league for a backup. And hey, we actually did suggest a couple guys that could be options. So if you're looking to find out who we're thinking, head on over to senstennial.com and you can find out.
Not quite the address, but that's okay. I'm pretty sure it's in our description. But love the passion.
I think it's like senstennial.wix.com or something like that.
It'll be in the description, everybody. But the one last topic I wanted to talk about before we get off the podcast, and I kind of wanted to surprise you guys with this one. We talked about a little beforehand. No, it's not bad. A little beforehand, but I want to just quickly touch on the World Juniors and Carter Yakemchuk. Now, Yakemchuk is obviously with the Calgary Hitmen, did not even get invited to Canada's World Junior camp. And, you know, he's having a good season in the WHL. He's currently sitting at 12 goals, 17 assists for 29 points in 24 games played. Currently on pace to have another 30-plus goal season in the WHL. And the nice thing is, he's on pace to have 30 less penalty minutes than he had last season. So it seems like he's playing a more disciplined game, which obviously you're really going to want when you only get 6 blue liners in your lineup on any given night. You can't have your boy stepping up and going to the box, you know, because they're like the tough guy on the team or whatever you want to call it, you know? So anyway, I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on Carter Yakemchuk, you know, good showing he's having with Calgary again this season. And maybe if you're bummed, not bummed, or whatever thoughts you may have on him not getting invited to the World Junior Camp for Canada.
Yeah, it's certainly disappointing. And I think that Coach Travis Green, Steve Staios were quite candid in their remarks the other week about Yakemchuk being excluded from the World Juniors Canada team. I think they both were quite clear about how disappointed they were to see that. I also think it's quite clear that the team hoped and expected that by sending him to the WHL for the season, that he would be playing for Team Canada at the World Juniors. And I'm not saying that if they didn't think that was going to happen, they would have kept him at the NHL level, but I think it was a large argument in favor of sending him to the W for the year. You know, let him see if he can do it again after the impressive offensive season he put together in 23-24. See if he can run it back. Let him get some reps with Team Canada. You know, it's always like a high stakes tournament, a lot of pressure, you know, really a unique experience for a lot of young players, a very formative experience for prospects, and something that really helps guys define themselves into the kind of players that they want to be going into the NHL. And so I think that the team and all of us fans can be disappointed that that doesn't appear to be happening. I suppose there's still an outside chance that if someone randomly gets dropped, he might get an emergency call up. But I guess for now, if you're Carter, your focus is on the WHL and trying to get your teams to the playoffs, try and put a run together, again, showcase what you can do in high pressure games, and try and earn yourself a spot out of training camp next year. Now it's also possible that the team decides to send him to the AHL next year and play against men and again level up his game a little bit more. But I mean, as a 7th round pick, stranger things have happened than seeing him walk right from junior into the NHL. Happens, I don't want to say all the time, but you know, certain players can hack it. And yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what he can do.
Matt, how are you feeling about the Yak?
The Yak, he's back. You know, he's having a good season in the WHL. 29 points in 24 games on a pretty meh Calgary Hitmen team. I think the thing that kind of gets my goat in this scenario is that Yakemchuk is not eligible next year. This was his last kick at the can. And I think Team Canada knew that. And at the same time, and it's probably been talked to death of a little bit, that Steve Staios was expecting an invite and he sent him back to make that decision a little easier for Team Canada, and then they snubbed him. I don't really know many of the guys that were invited to Team Canada's camp, but I'll tell you this: I think there are two that are in the same stratosphere of offensive defensemen compared to Yakemchuk, and that would be Zane Parekh and Sam Dickinson. And Sam Dickinson wasn't known for his offense, and he's popped off this season. And then Matthew Schaefer, he's a draft eligible this year, who is probably going to go, 2 or 3. But it just feels like they overthought everything and said, well, he's not going to be here next year, so why would we bother? And that's reductive, especially when you have a guy who, quite honestly, has one of the best shots from a defenseman I've seen in a long time. And that's in the NHL, period. He picks his spots exceptionally well. He scored multiple goals in the preseason against NHL goaltenders. We saw what he did against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I think it's just kind of stupid to go, yeah, but nah. And as soon as Team Canada falls into power play troubles, people are going to be pointing to that decision. Well, you left him off, and now you have to live with that decision. So yeah, I guess I am frustrated by it because it's in Ottawa. It would have been really nice to see an Ottawa prospect that isn't on Kazakhstan. And yeah, it just feels like Team Canada made an unforced error here, and now everybody has to live with that.
Yeah, and I was going to say they even actually had the GM of Team Canada on the radio on TSN 1200 last week, I believe. And he had said he's actually out in the Calgary area, and he had been able to scout Yakemchuk a handful of times. And basically when they asked him, why a guy like Yakemchuk wasn't chosen, he didn't actually give a straightforward response. I would have liked to hear more. He basically just said that, they had a certain, I guess, or there were tough decisions that they had to make and this, that, and the other thing. And yeah, I was like, okay, great non-answer. Would have been better if even if you have to be honest and be like, the player is great, but there were these deficiencies in his game that we were a little bit concerned about or something. But this was a bit of a bummer to not hear an actual honest response from him. But oh well, that's how it goes sometimes. What can you do? But hopefully, we can see him come back to the NHL. Maybe next year he'll be able to play a handful of regular season games, bounce between NHL and the AHL, and we'll see how he performs.
Couldn't agree more, Matt.
Now, on that note, the website that Matt so graciously mentioned earlier is senstennial.wixsite.com/Senstennial. Easy to remember? I don't know, but hey, we'll put it in the description. You can go on there. That's where we're posting all of our blog posts. Not sure if we'll record another episode with the holidays fast approaching. It feels like December has flown by. So if you're listening or watching this, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And maybe we'll have some articles go up over the holidays. Not 100% sure, but stay tuned. We'll definitely be back in the new year. And enjoy the time with your families, and go Sens go.
Go Sens, go, everybody.
Keep those W's rolling.
Hell yeah.